Hey everyone, Simon here from Top Tennis Training, and in this video we're going to compare the Federer forehand to the Nadal forehand. We're going to take a look at both forehands, how they set up, how they prepare, and how they execute the stroke. Now before we get into the video, I just want to mention that I'm not biased towards Federer or Nadal. I like both players, and I think both players have great forehands, possibly the two best forehands of all time. Now, which grip do both players use? So Federer uses an Eastern forehand grip. This is where the palm of the hand is almost on the back of the racket, like so. If I was to put my hand like this and then just go down to the grip, that's the Eastern forehand grip. Nadal, on the other hand, uses a semi-Western. Now, when he was younger, there are images and videos of him with a more extreme grip, almost close to the Western grip. But as he's progressed his career, he started to move slightly further around towards that semi-Western into the full semi-Western grip. So he's using a semi-Western as of 2018. Now the difference in the grip will slightly change the angle of the strings in the preparation phase, as we'll see when we watch their forehands in action. Now both players start the swing with their wrist extending backwards, so wrist extension happening. Federer does it less than Nadal. Nadal really pulls his wrist back, laying the wrist back right at the start of the swing. So he's in the ready position with a semi-Western grip, and as soon as he sees us coming to his forehand side, he really lays the wrist back into that wrist extension position. Now what this will allow later on in the swing is for a lot of leverage and a lot of lag in that racket lag position. So at the start of the swing, he's pulling the wrist back using his non-hitting hand. This is the right hand, as Nadal's of course left-handed, so he's really in that position. The tip of the racket is up to the sky. Federer, on the other hand, doesn't lay it back so far, but he still has the wrist in that extension position. As he starts to swing, Federer's strings will be facing towards the net. Whereas Nadal quickly turns it into that side-on position. So Federer starts like so, and Nadal starts a little bit more extreme on the side of the body straight away. Another major difference in the start of the swing is Nadal really keeps his elbow tucked into his body. So as he pulls this wrist back, as he comes into that wrist extension position, his wrist is laid back, but his elbow stays in close to his body. Whereas on the Federer forehand, you can see that his elbow has a bit more space between the elbow and the body. There's a bit more of a gap in that start of that preparation phase. So it's almost like Federer is leading with this elbow for a split second, creating a bit of space for the racket to then extend outwards. Now both players start off with a great unit turn. This is that coil with the upper body. So from the ready position, Federer's turning and he's coiling the upper body. This is that stretch in the core, in the oblique muscles. This is where you're storing energy in the obliques by coiling the upper body firstly, before you start then really opening up the hips and turning the hips side on. Nadal does the exact same thing. So he's from the ready position, he's turning and coiling that upper body. At the very start of the swing, this is evident on both players' forehands. Another thing to note is when Nadal reaches that side position, his racket head starts by being completely above the grip, but then his wrist lays back even further and his strings open up to the sky slightly in that preparation phase, before he reaches the power position. Whereas Federer has his strings slightly down to the ground. Ever so slightly, but still a slight angle. He's not completely above the grip like this. Now something to note is Nadal also holds the racket much longer, the throat of the racket much longer than Federer. So if this is the net down here, Federer, once he gets to 2 or 3 o'clock, if we go 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock on side and 6 o'clock would be the back of the court. When Federer is in the ready position, as soon as he starts turning, he's at 1 o'clock now, he's at 2 o'clock, the non-hitting hand is coming off the throat of the racket. So it's ready position, turn, the unit turn, and now he lets go. Whereas Nadal keeps his right hand on the racket, on the throat of the racket, much longer. So if Nadal was a right-handed player, he's holding the throat until about 3 or 4 o'clock. So he's releasing around 4 o'clock. When he gets to that position, that's when his right hand is coming off. Now, him being a left-hander, he's releasing around 8 o'clock on that side of the body. This will ensure that he has a massive coil in the upper body, and it's really ensuring that his right shoulder is fully side on to the net when he does reach that power position. Now, when both players reach the power position, that back position, both have very similar power positions. Now, Federer's forehand has adapted over time. When he was younger and he first started winning majors, his power position was much higher than it currently is. Now he has more of a habit of turning the body, coiling the body, and then dropping the racket head when he does reach that back position. Now this ensures that he'll have heavy topspin if he wants it. So the string bed, the side of the string he's going to hit the ball with, close to the ground when he reaches that back position. Now from here, he can manipulate what he's doing on the forward phase, that racket lag phase. He can change the angle of the strings, and this is because of his grip. And Nadal also does this. Nadal reaches that position, and in years past, you would see him in that position here, where the tip of the racket is pointing up to the sky. But now, both players have adapted this more downward position when they reach that power position. However, it's important to note that when they're preparing to reach that position, both players have the top of the racket higher than the grip level. So the racket head is higher than the grip level. They aren't preparing like this, but they're preparing upwards. Federer has a bit more space between the elbow and the body, and then he has that almost dip with the racket head before he starts the racket lag. Nadal, the exact same thing. He's starting with the racket head up, and as you can see, his strings are almost facing the sky slightly when he starts that preparation, and then he has that drop with the racket head. But both players have already achieved that wrist back, the wrist extension position, and have created that leverage so they have space from here to now accelerate the racket forward. If I'm starting on level with the racket head and the grip together, it's much harder for me to have that same acceleration because the space is very limited. Whereas with these swings, they're coming up and then they're coming forward. So there's much more space to accelerate that racket head. Now both players achieve great racket lag. This is where the top of the racket is lagging behind the grip before they make contact. So the ball's coming on to them, and it's almost like they're going to hit the ball with the bottom of the racket. The butt cap of the racket is leading the way forward. And both players achieve this really well. Both players use the extended forehand contact point, so they really extend out to make contact. Now the major difference in this racket lag phase between the Federer and Nadal forehand will be just a slight angle of difference on the strings, and this is due to the grip. So Federer's grip being the eastern forehand, he's able to really open up the strings a lot more compared to the semi-western of Nadal because of the grip. So both players are achieving that great racket lag, and this will help them to get more power and more spin on the ball. It's giving them force over that ball. Now the follow through, Nadal of course has made this buggy whip follow through very famous, and that's because of his intention on the shot. Now Federer, because he likes to play a bit more aggressive, he can hit heavy topspin when he wants to, but he can also really flatten out the forehand. And I think this is one of the major differences between the Federer and Nadal forehand. The ability of Federer to hit with crazy spin, but on the next shot really flatten out the ball. And this was something that was very evident when I was on court with Federer and watching him training with Alex. I could see that one of the shots he hits might be a heavy spin shot, and the next shot will be completely flat and it just goes through the court very quick. Whereas most of the time when I see Nadal trading, Nadal always kind of keeps some base of topspin because of his grip and also because of his follow through. In training, he hits flatter than in matches. That's very evident. He hits the forehand in training most of the time with this across the chest finish. Whereas when it comes to the match, he tends to go back to this more because he wants more spin. Now, if we talk about why Nadal uses this buggy whip forehand, if our goal is to get as much topspin as possible, if I've dropped the racket head under the ball level and I'm coming up to the contact point, for me to now continue this brush, I need to go upwards. And then for me to now finish over my shoulder or across my chest doesn't make much sense, because my goal is to generate that upwards power and that upwards racket head speed. So I'm going from the point of contact and I'm going upwards. So the simplest way for Nadal to finish, and the most logical way, would be for him to go, instead of here downwards now, he's coming from here upwards and then finishing over the head. And this is why Nadal uses that forehand finish so often, because his intention is to generate heavy topspin. His intention is to push the player back with that aggressive spin. And if we compare that to Federer, Federer likes to use the across the chest finish. So this is where he's making contact, his strings are now coming over the ball, and then he finishes across the chest, almost pulling the racket into his body on that finish. And this is a more traditional ATP style finish. It's where they're making contact and pulling the racket across the chest. It isn't the traditional high finish over the shoulder, and it isn't too low. So we've got Nadal using this finish a lot of times in practice, and also when he wants to flatten out the shot in a match, he will use this finish. But he can always go back to that buggy whip finish when he wants more topspin. Now, the major difference in the follow through when both players are using that across the chest finish is the fact that Federer looks so much more relaxed and loose. So Federer is finishing and it's almost like he doesn't care. He's just so loose on that follow through. There's almost no tension in the arm. Whereas when we see Nadal doing it, you can see he's almost muscling the ball. He's a little bit tighter and he's almost using his muscles to pull that racket back in. Whereas Federer is a lot more relaxed and a lot more loose. Another major difference in the matches is Federer likes to use the neutral stance a lot more and step forward, taking the ball on the rise and really going forward with his body weight. So if he's using an open stance, his body weight is kind of going upwards. Whereas if he steps in with this neutral stance, now Federer can really go forward into the ball using that body weight transfer in the shot. And Federer really likes to do this in the matches, takes time away from players by doing so. Nadal, on the other hand, likes to use more the semi-open or open stance. And this again comes back to his goal of generating that topspin. If I use the open stance, it's much easier for me to drive upwards on the ball when I'm making contact. Whereas if I'm using a neutral stance, my power is now being directed forwards, so it suits the flatter shot compared to the topspin shot. So a quick recap: Federer uses the Eastern forehand, Nadal uses the semi-Western forehand grip. At the start of the swing, Federer likes to keep his strings a little bit longer towards the net, whereas Nadal really likes to pull the racket head back and lay the wrist back in that preparation phase, so it looks a little bit more like this compared to Federer's, where it's like this. Federer has a bit more space in the preparation with the elbow being slightly away from the body, whereas Nadal keeps his elbow tucked in until he starts that forward phase of the swing, and then he achieves really good extension with that left hand. Both players achieve great racket lag like this, and both players extend out to make contact in front of their body. Federer likes to use more the neutral stance whenever he can, whenever he's got time, because he likes to flatten out the shot more often than Nadal. Nadal likes to use the semi-open or the open stance because he's driving up the ball and his intention is to generate that heavy topspin, whereas Federer can do both. Generate heavy topspin, but then on the next shot flatten it out for the winner. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more comparisons in the future, tell us down below in the comment section. Also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you get our latest videos as soon as we release them. All the best, guys. Signing off, Simon from TTT. See you soon.